adopting and pretty
Hey, I'm not gonna
sucked up.
act
Now
on
the
this
federal
thing
government
telling me to kill
to
people.
start its own reserves.
It didn't even tell
very
me to
point against
anyway. It
Warren
said
Wayne
it's
brought
going
up
to.
there. Self-custody is
I'm
absolute
just
king.
letting you know.
Wayne, I see you got your hand up down
They
there.
both do it too.
What's your thoughts on this announcement from Donald Trump tonight?
It's fantastic. Darkside said a little bit earlier that he was surprised
Self-custody.
by the scope of the announcement. And I just want to point out that there's been a great work that's been put out by organizations like the Blockchain Association and BTC Policy Org. It's a Twitter handle. That's a group formed out of Bitcoin Magazine, David Bailey's group. But a lot of what's ended up in these executive orders, and a lot of what's been probably going to be discussed at tomorrow's meeting, it's public information. It's out there. You just got to pay attention and take a look at what's out there, because I think there's just really good signal to me that the Trump administration is listening. They're actually listening to people, and they're not listening to politicians. And I want to push back on what Kelly had said a few minutes ago about this being a bipartisan issue. It really isn't. We would not be having this conversation if the Democrats controlled the White House and Congress. They made a huge strategic mistake in the last election, creating the anti-crypto army. Almost all of the opposition to crypto is coming from Democrats. And to the degree that you want to advance Bitcoin and you want to see these types of things happen, there needs to be continued pressure on mostly Democrat
I was going to go there and
politicians
show you how to do Bitcoin, but they don't want me to move Bitcoin that way. And I can't do it here in that way without buying during the daytime
of which I am a
to
proud
move
founding
it.
member, then they're going to lose elections. So, but I'm really thrilled about this. This is a historic moment for all of us. This is something that people have been just was unfathomable even a few years ago. So I think we're in gradually then suddenly territory.
You know what, Wayne? I definitely agree with you, and I appreciate that. It's kind of bizarre for me to feel like things are bipartisan when you get.
Well, you would hope it would be. It's a reasonable thing for you to think it's bipartisan.
No. I'm not talking about just the sentiment it should be. I'm talking about when you get 7 or 8 votes from across the aisle. These days, that's bipartisan. In reality, we need to have closer to 40 or 50%, right, to make it even. But it's just amazing when you see even 3 people dissenting from the Democratic Party to vote for something mostly Republicans are, because this is a good for all people, banked, not banked, rich, poor. If you have skin, then this serves you in an incredible positive way. But I want to throw it over to Simon, because you've obviously been doing work in the space, building, investing, talking, and we've had you on the space a number of times. What's your initial sort of impression of this and its sort of impact?
Hey everybody, thanks for having me. I believe that the market neutral part of it is actually pretty interesting, because the whole nature of a strategic reserve is to be strategic and use your reserves in order to achieve strategic goals. I hope that one of the main goals is to end the Fed eventually, and we may see that, we may not. But having a strategic reserve gives you the opportunity to use that strategic reserve for those goals. But having said that, it is also an environment of utilizing Bitcoin in many of the upcoming currency wars that we may be experiencing. So let's say that the US government owns British guilds and it decides that it wants to normalize with Russia, and the UK decides that it wants to confiscate Russia's money and go into a war machine in order to support the UK, German, and French military-industrial complex. I don't know if anyone's familiar with a situation that we're currently in right now. But if it had Bitcoin strategic reserves, it could decide to swap out Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is the neutral asset by which you could do that, and then that neutral asset could be convertible into other strategic assets. So it opens up a very interesting scenario, which also opens up the game theory for the other countries. So whether the BRICS corridor starts to back, whatever it may launch with some Bitcoin, and whether the Middle East decides to repurpose some of its sovereign wealth in order to invest in mining, in order to utilize Bitcoin as an efficient way of managing. And then Europe could also fight back and head itself from a breakdown of the European Central Bank or the European Union, where they have their Bitcoin strategic reserves. So for me, this is the start of using Bitcoin as a mechanism for strategically protecting yourself from any of the geopolitical events and using it really what it is meant to be. I think it's also worth pointing out that if you were given a budget to acquire Bitcoin, or you were given all of the assets that you could swap out for Bitcoin, my understanding would be that the assets that you can swap for Bitcoin would be significantly larger than any budget you could ever achieve. And maybe, I don't know, but maybe there's a loophole there in terms of the congressional process and what is required in order to get this through the door and faster. We'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I'd love to touch on again, and Dennis, I'm going to bring you back on if you'll kind of re-highlight this. I think there's a little confusion whether positive, negative, and then furthermore, what the process following this is. Because executive order doesn't necessarily mean codified into law. For now, there's a precedent set. What does this mean in regards to like the Cynthia Loomis bill and any impact this may have on that? And it's essentially those sorts of topics. He may be off typing somewhere. So anybody else, if you got thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I got David Hill down here with his hand up. David, thanks for joining us on the space. What are your thoughts on this executive order Trump just rolled out today?
Yeah, man, thanks for having me up. I appreciate it, Kelly, Mario, Doc Dweth. Yeah, I'm not going to answer the last question, but I will tell you, and if I said your name wrong, I
Truth, like Drew?
Dweth. Well, it's D-W-E-T-H. I can understand how you messed that one up. So
I looked fast, brother. Sorry, I was going to call you doctor because that's all I see right now, but then I pressed the button. So I'll just call you doctor. But it's a win, right? It's a win for Bitcoin. It's a win for crypto. It's a win for the U.S. It's a win for all the people that have been holding for a while. You know, I've been playing in this space for a couple of years, and the amount of people that tell me I'm crazy, tell me that it's fake, it's nothing. I think that, I don't want to say, I'm not going to say, hey, told you so, but hey, I mean, I think it's a great start for us, and I think, geez, the only way to go from here is up, right? And it's interesting too, because if you think about still the amount of adoption. I mean, I know on this app we're all talking about it all the time, but if you go out and you go to a meeting at the chamber with a couple hundred people, a very small percentage of those people in Bitcoin, so I just think this is going to be massive, and it's going to bring more people in, and I think it's huge. The interesting thing, though, to be honest with you, and Kelly, we were on here the other day, and we were talking about this, and as we were doing it, everything was jumping up. But if you look at what's interesting, because we obviously have no idea, I don't know. I certainly don't know anything about this asset. Yes, honey. Give me one second. But what I will say is the price has actually been going down in the last hour or so since this has happened. So can anybody explain?
Yeah, I've been talking about this the last couple of days. I think we just came into the most over-expectant market because of the situation we're at. And although this is all good, people are expecting just green candles. And so despite that, I'm looking at this cheering for joy that we're getting. Yeah, what would you like to say?
I had a show earlier, Kelly, where I said if they don't buy, the next post they make doesn't say, we bought, it tanks. So I'm glad to be here and take my victory lap. Great news, but it tanks. So here we are.
Yeah, it's much like the ETF. You got the sell-off after that, much like the coin IPO sell-off. That was more of a market top situation. But understanding where we're at in the architecture and framework that's been building the last 16 years, and predominantly since January 11th last year, is overwhelmingly bullish. And the fact that anybody's even mildly worried right now, I'm like, you know what? Give up your Bitcoin to somebody else that's looking a little longer term. But I want to get it over to our boy Gary Cardone. Haven't been on stage with you in a minute. We both been off doing our own stuff. Dude, what do you make of this? What do you make of this executive order? What do you make of this summit tomorrow? What's going on, my man?
Well, we have our news, so now we can get back to work.
That's it.
I like Simon's perspective on this. I think it's very bullish. I think it's getting sold because maybe you were expecting something else, but I think this is more than I expected. I find it interesting that he's doing this before the summit. So I think that this little party tomorrow is going to come and go really quick with some other news. And in fairness, I mean, look, this is just not. I know it's important to us, but there's some other things going on that's really much more important. So I'm a little surprised. This is not his normal marketing style. But I would expect a further sell-off on the alts no matter what